Welcome to Faith in 5, a weekly video devotional designed to discuss practical spiritual concepts in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Mark Vandella. One of my really good friends is a writer. My friend Jason has written a screenplay, and now he's actually taking classes at Second City to hone his craft and get better. And I've always been fascinated when I meet with Jason. I look forward to opportunities to either play golf with him, to sit down and share a drink or a meal with him, because I love learning about what he's learning and how he puts his stories together. I've actually asked him to send me a copy of his screenplay because I'm fascinated by story. My fascination with story all started with a youth group experience, taking a backpacking trip and sitting around a campfire or around a meal and sharing life stories. As that happens, you start to learn more about your story and yourself, and you get to learn about shared experience, but also the uniqueness of your story. It creates value. And as I've been pursuing story and how it aligns with God and faith, I've stumbled upon a couple really good resources. One is Donald Miller's Storyline Conference. And with that conference, he has a whole series of curriculum that kind of helps you through discovering your story. And so today we're starting a new series called Tell It Well, which is based on a book by Jennifer Spolma, where she lays out the process of story in our lives and the importance of story in our lives in 3 steps. The first one is to discover, which is what Donald Miller talks about a ton in his process. And then to own our stories and to start to learn how we might live that out more. And then lastly, she says it's key to share our stories and to share what God's doing in our stories. And that's what makes a difference in this world. Actually, the most recent learning I had from Jason is I asked him what he's learning in his classes with Second City. And he says that one of the things that he's learned is to write scenes based on characters, wants, and needs. See, Donald Miller talks a lot about the fact that we have desires and we have needs. But the most important part and the thing that makes us unique in our stories is this idea that we're co-authors, and this idea that it's not all pretty and easy. Those are the 2 things that I've taken away from his conference. See, Donald Miller asks 4 questions when it comes to discovering your story. And he says, 1, you need to figure out who you are. What are you naturally wired to do and naturally good at? The second question he asks is, what do you want? Right? It's the same thing that Jason's learning is, how do I create these characters that have wants and needs? What do I want? But then Don says that the third question we need to ask ourselves is, what conflict, what challenge do we need to overcome to get those wants and those needs? And once we acknowledge that, what's the fourth question is, what's the plan? Why do we want to do this, and what's the plan to accomplish this? I've taken several people through this process as coaching clients as they've tried to discover their meaning and their calling. And it works almost every time. See, Donald says that basically if you think about your life as on a timeline, and you can plot these significant pieces of your life, like the timeline is neutral here, and there's some things that are peaks, and then there's some things that are valleys, and there's deep suffering and issues. And he says what you have to do is start. And we ask those 4 questions, but part of asking those 4 questions is that we plot out those really significant moments in our lives. And then as we do that, we look back at those moments and figure out where is God, how is God using those moments to tell a very cool, unique story. See, Jenny in her book, Tell It Well, says that the world is craving real, honest stories. The vulnerability, the very vulnerability of asking these questions makes us relatable and makes our stories powerful. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 3:16 through 18, it says that whenever we turn our face towards God, there's a veil that's lifted and we become face to face with God. This is that co-author kind of idea that God is writing a narrative using us, with us, alongside of us. And we can do it face to face with God. And once we're face to face with God, we realize that we have a living, personal presence, that God is here with us, doing it alongside us. And then it goes on to say that once we realize this, and once we start writing these stories and sharing our stories, that our lives gradually become brighter and more beautiful. as God asks us questions and he speaks into our lives, we become more like him as we co-author and co-write these stories together. We're starting this new series because with Faith in 5, we really want to continue to be intentional about engaging our faith. And I think this story is so important. And the world misses something when we keep our stories to ourselves. And I think we miss meaning and we lack meaning when we don't take the time to discover our stories, to discover the conflicts that we have to go through and why we might have overcome those and how God plays a part in that. So this week, as you live out your life, I encourage you to actually draw out a timeline. Map those places, the ups and the downs, and step back from it and look at where has God shown up? Where do you need to ask God to show up? And what story is he trying to tell through you?